So you got the wine?
Yeah, I felt like I needed wine, not beer. I'm trying to bring the level of kind of classiness
All right.
up. Just a little bit on the
we'll
shelf,
keep this
that's all right.
classy. Where good ideas come from. Can you tell me where good ideas come from, but in like a shorter answer than 300 pages?
No, I have to spend
You need all that? Okay.
7 or 8 hours at least. The big kind of myth that I'm trying to overturn with this book is this idea that ideas come from solitary, contemplative moments of, epiphanies and eureka moments when you're sitting there alone in your room and suddenly this great idea comes into your head. And what I've tried to do in the book is to go back and really look at the history of innovative places, basically, and figure out what are the characteristic kind of properties of all those places. And it turns out that
physical locations?
Physical locations and kind of media locations. So it's everything from, what are the office environments, what are the kind of social environments, what are the media environments that have led to innovation. And even there's a bit of a twist in the book, which is that I look at biological systems that have also been innovative. It's the idea that in biological systems, for instance, the adjacent possible, if you've got a soup of molecules like we're talking about in kind of the beginnings of life, there are a set of, kind of early basic elements that are there. And the adjacent possible is all the first order combinations that can form by those molecules kind of attaching to each other in kind of new ways. If you don't have that medium that allows all these, small little building blocks to be kind of reshuffled in new configurations, nothing ever happens, right? You don't get that kind of creativity.
The environment needs to be right.
The environment needs to be right. And so in the book I call that kind of the liquid network, right?
Gotcha.
And one example of that is, in a sense, partially the environment we're in right now, where people would get together from different backgrounds, different, kind of passions and interests, and they would just hang out and share ideas and talk about science and talk about politics and talk about religion. Mm-hmm. And the coffee house is a huge driver of innovation in Enlightenment era England and in France as well.
Coffee houses, can bars also work?
They work great for the first hour or two, and then they get
and then it's a problem. Do you also talk about the lead up to 9/11?
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk about the failure to put together ideas and not how it led to that tragedy, but there were failures within the FBI, and why was that structure not conducive to good ideas?
One of the themes in the book is this idea that you need to have these hubs where ideas can network and recombine, because most good ideas start as a fragment of themselves. They start as kind of a hunch. And often those things need to collide with somebody else's hunch to really turn into something interesting. And 9/11 is a great example of that, because there are basically two hunches that, had they been able to connect with each other, it might have actually changed the course of history on a real level. One of them was the Phoenix Memo. And the Phoenix Memo is this memo by a FBI operative in Phoenix who noticed this weird pattern of Middle Eastern men, some of whom had connections to terrorist organizations, who seemed to be enrolling in flight schools. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, in August, the Minnesota kind of 20th hijacker is picked up trying to learn how to fly a 747 without being interested in landing the 747, as the kind of famous story goes. The problem basically was that the FBI didn't have a system for connecting hunches. And it basically had a system for keeping hunches in silos where they can't talk to each other.
Do they still have? That's still
They
an issue?
still use they use this kind of antiquated system. They've tried to get off of it, but technologically they're just kind of stuck.
What are some, I know this isn't simple, you wrote 300 pages on it. Are there some simple things people can do to put themselves in an environment that's conducive to good ideas?
What I've tried to do in my own life, and I think this is pretty good advice, is that I've kept this single file on my computer. It was originally a Word document, now it's a Google Doc, so I can get to it anywhere.
Yeah. You're just putting these half ideas.
Every single half, quarter, eighth of an idea that I've got at any different time, and I just write them down in one place. I spend no time organizing them, right? I go back and I reread the entire file once every 3 or 4 months. Every time I do it, there's some fragment from 3 years ago or 5 years ago. I'm like, oh, now that finally makes sense.
Okay. Do you ever go, wow, what the hell was I doing?
No. It's like, wow, how many glasses of wine did I have when I wrote that?
Yeah, you probably shouldn't go into that doc after you've been drinking a lot. Leave those ideas
It's actually a great place to go when you've been drinking, in some sense, because altering your kind of internal chemicals pushes you in new directions. It will allow you to explore the adjacent possible in some ways. Problem is, in that exploring, a lot of the stuff you come up with is just garbage, right?
Right.
And so
some of us more than others come up with a lot of garbage. Yeah. We always ask who's your favorite alcoholic writer, but usually that's like a novelist.
And I think the most interesting story is the Styrum story, right? Where in terms of fiction, where he was a big drinker, an unbelievably successful, beautiful novelist. I think they had some kind of like barn in Connecticut where he would go and he would listen to jazz really loud and he would drink a bunch of cocktails and he would work. That is one kind of way of exploring the adjacent possible.